mic.
All right, welcome to our online class session for marketing research. So I'm gonna require your participation a bit. It quite gets lonely on this site with the online classes. So first of all, there are two things that you have to confirm for me before we continue. I'm gonna start by sharing a screen. So I need you to let me know if you are able to see the screen. So at the moment, the screen should be showing the PowerPoint presentation. So can you just unmute the mic? I won't be able to see what you write. Just unmute the mic and let me know that you can see it.
Yes, we can.
You can see the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
All right, 100%. So in the textbook, I'm sure you have a textbook in front of you as well. You should be on chapter 5. That's where we're going to continue. That's going to be on page 67. And I also need to find out, there was an email yesterday that I received from one of my colleagues, and they indicated that there is one or two students or a couple of students whereby they had to go and collect a textbook, but they couldn't get the textbooks. Is there any of you who is affected by such, or you all have textbooks? Please confirm, just unmute the mic. Okay, so I'm taking everyone has textbook and we're not affected. All right, on chapter 5, we're going to talk about the research design, and it's in part of the research proposal that we are doing. So if you look in terms of our research proposal, the guidelines that we follow, on the slide is showing you steps, which is step 1 up until step 8. So basically, introduction, you'll remember that's where we basically write our title. We write it's prepared by what, by who, for which company, and then the date. And then number 2, you have research problem and objectives. And then in that we include things such as our marketing problem, followed by research objectives, primary, secondary. We've got hypotheses and so on. So the last thing of which when we ended the class, which is under research problem and objective, is research delimitations. So it's nowhere in the textbook, but you will find it in your research proposal guidelines. So if you missed that last class we had, whereby I've discussed this chapter, just add research delimitations somewhere, but the other students should have it. So you want to add it at the end of chapter 4. So in the textbook or in your notes, at the end there, you'll see they have research hypotheses on chapter 4, and then that's when the study ends or the chapter ends. So you just want to write research delimitations. That will be included as well there. And then research delimitations, it refers to the limitations of research. What usually happens is that when you conduct a marketing research, some companies or some people wants to use our findings because we have proved something. But those findings are not general. They are limited to certain aspects. So we talk about 3 aspects there. The first one is a sample unit. Sample unit, it talks about location. So for example, study findings could be limited to Pretoria, or they could be limited to South Africa, depending on where data was collected. It could also be limited to universities or Pretoria campus, if you don't want to generalize. And then we've got sample element. Those are the people we've interviewed. It does not mean that young people will perceive things the same as older people. There is difference in ages, there is difference in cultural aspects and so on. So you must be specific about the person you interviewed, and then you indicate that our research is be limited to students, if it's students, or young adults and so on. So, and the last thing is date. So it's important to indicate the findings. Research findings might also be limited to a year switch of where they publish the data. So it does not mean the results we get today will be the same results in few years time to come. They will change. So in other words, that simply means that we don't want people to think that the old methods will still work in the new normal that we live in. So we must specify that the research findings are limited to what year. So if that was conducted 2018, we indicate that. Okay. So now we can continue with number 3. Number 3 is research design, and this is where we come in terms of chapter 5. So chapter 5, research design on page 69. There are 2 things that we're going to look into under research design here on this chapter. And then we're going to look at some theory regarding those 2 approaches, which is qualitative and quantitative approach. So a typical marketing research proposal looks like that. I've already talked about this part. Research eliminations, this is where I was indicating that is not in the chapter, so it's the last thing that you have. So we've discussed probably all of this, and this is basically your structure of your next semester test, because you are required to write a research proposal there, because this is practical than the theory that you wrote in the multiple choice. So you must be able to actually do this research proposal. Practical application, a lot of marks. Previously in class, I indicated that you must use these ticks to guide you. So you can see here we've got 4 ticks, and then that means that under secondary research objective, I will discuss that. For example, the discussion is in the textbook, and we've discussed secondary research objective. Those are specific aspects that the researcher wants to investigate within the main framework. And then practical application, you can see now, we've already have 1 mark, so the other 3 marks are for practical application. So this can guide you that I need to provide 3 secondary research objectives. Primary research objective will always have 1 primary research objectives and the rest there. So when under research design, you've got 2 things that you are discussing: research approach, followed by research design itself. So let's start with research approach. Starting with the discussion, tell you about the 2 research approaches here, and then we can motivate our answers there. So these are the 2 research approaches that we have. But I want you, because it also wants you to actually discuss what is a research approach, you should also download that research guidelines. So let me quickly take you there. How do you find them? I'm gonna ask you to also notify, because as soon as I'm changing the screens here and I go to a different screen, you might be able to see the screen or not see the screen. So please confirm if you are with me on the screen. Right now, I'm trying to log into Brightspace. So I need you to confirm if you can see Brightspace page now. I don't want to lose you. Just unmute.
Yeah, we can see.
You can see. So everyone is following. Thank you. So we're talking about marketing research. This is a module that we follow. So on Brightspace, what you want to do, you want to come to content once you are in the subject. And you've got these headings here. Some of them will appear on my side, but not on your side. So under the learning content, this is where most of your stuff is at. So it's divided into chapters. You will see all the chapters for learning content there. What is important with this, previously I've indicated that you should go under each learning content, download the PowerPoint presentation and videos. So please do that for chapter 5 as well. And you've got activities somewhere for each and every chapter. So please follow those activities as well. They will help you a lot. So there are 2 ways we can actually access that guidelines. It's a good thing because I'm struggling to access it now with you, which means we must definitely find a way whereby we are sure where it is. It's usually under learning content. Okay, it could also be under practical guide. Let's see. Yes. Okay, sorry about that. It's under practical guide. So please make sure you are able to get this. So under practical guide, you want to download research proposal guidelines and framework. Let me quickly close here. And then it's going to tell you about research proposal here. So when you click this research proposal, it's going to download the document as it's doing for my site here. I'm quickly going to save that and then I open it. So you will see this document is 13 pages. And then the research proposal that I'm showing on the slide, this is where it's coming from. And it's also having those discussion and those definitions. So this is a structure. At the moment we are here under research design. We're also going to talk about time and financial cost as part of chapter 5 as this one as well. But this is the important part, discussion points, whereby you discuss everything. You will see all these discussions are here. A problem indicates an overall statement, so you don't actually need to go through the book and look for them and find them. You have all the discussion. What you don't have is practical application because it will differ from case to case. So let's start with the research design. But before we continue, please participate by just typing something there. It could be a smiley face on the chat box for those discussion that I gave you here to show you that you are still alive and you are with me. Any emoticon there you can share with us. Taking a 2 minutes break as well. Thank you, Chweni, for participating. Can have all of you in the chat box just type something there, a smiley face, anything. Show your presence, please. Thank you, Nobubele. Thank you, Mahlazi. Arma Lope, you've raised your hand. I'm not sure if maybe you have a question or you were just participating. So if you are just participating, you can lower your hand, but if you have a question, you can quickly ask it by unmuting the mic first. Okay, we're going to continue with the presentation now. So I'm going back to the slides. So we're following here in terms of the research design. So here is your definition. A research approach, that's the first thing. The research design is determined by the approach to the research, which is either qualitative, quantitative, or multi-mix. So what this means is that when you choose a research design, remember a research design is a structure. So a research design is some sort of a blueprint that guides you that you should always follow these steps one by one and so on. So we've got different research designs, but you can't just choose any. So when you choose a specific one. And now when you choose a specific one, it will always depend. So it says the research design is determined by the approach. It always depends on the approach of the research, which is either qualitative and quantitative. So we're going to talk about these approaches and talk about how do you choose between them and which what are the specific aspects you are using to choose between the two, because you cannot just choose on one aspect. You usually look into 3 or more aspects. So let's go back to the slide now. So this is the slide. It talks about those research approaches. The first one is qualitative. The other one is quantitative. So I also want you to follow with me in the textbook. So you will Basically, in the textbook, you go to page 76. On page 76, you should see a table similar to the one that is showing on the slide. So the table, it differentiates between the two. So let's start with qualitative, as it says there, followed by quantitative. So before we get to that, so you're gonna look into in terms of the definition of qualitative research. In the textbook, they talk more about that. So quantitative research is on page 74. You will see quantitative there. You'll see qualitative as well on page 74. So you want to highlight or you want to underline in the textbook there, we're talking about qualitative research is about exploring issues, understanding underlying reason and motivation. The aim is to explain current situation and describe the situation for particular groups so the findings can be generalized. So only that first sentence that I want you to highlight is about exploring issues, understanding underlying reason and motivations. And then when you look on the slide or in the table, that is the purpose. So that sentence, it comes from the purpose, which is the main aim. So the main aim in this case is to understand and interpret. That's what they say about qualitative research. Whereas with quantitative research, we're talking about total different story here. We want to test the hypothesis. So what it means is that usually when we have a new topic, we would have no clue about that topic, what it is. So just to explain, you'll see the slide talking about the COVID-19. So let's say COVID-19, if it was 2019 when they've identified that first one, by that time they just wanted to understand. There was no hypothesis that they could develop because this is something that is relatively new. Although the origins can be dated back to something like 2012 to other causes and so on, but that was happening after they understood it. So before they couldn't understand and then they had to conduct qualitative research. So when they want to test the hypothesis, it means we already know what is COVID-19. We already know how it affects people. We also already know things such as how it can be prevented. But all those things we can say are their assumptions, meaning that we haven't conducted a quantitative research. It's just an interpretation of COVID-19. Here in South Africa, we were just told, for example, wash your hands, sanitize, wear a mask, and tell all those things. Basically, you will find that there's very few studies which have actually tested that hypothesis. So with quantitative research, as soon as we take a sample, maybe 500 people, we say wear a mask, we expose them to conditions of COVID-19 and we see if they are protected. That will be quantitative research because we are testing a hypothesis. And then we do the same with the other 500, maybe without wearing a mask. So if we find the results, they are the same, we can prove that hypothesis and say mask does not work. But if the results are different, meaning that more lives on the other side where they wear a mask, they were not affected or infected, we can prove that research hypothesis to say masks are effective. So that's how it differs. But if it was qualitative research, we wouldn't know about masks. By that time, we'll only hire interview as experts. And then the experts, they understand the virus, things such as doctors and so on. So those people will be able to do it for us. It's always few people in terms of understanding and interpreting because not everyone knows about the virus by that stage. So as I've indicated, in terms of this quantitative research using this case study of COVID-19, we will know that they told us that the symptoms include coughing, includes fever, muscle pain, and so on. All these we're just interpreting and understanding. There was nothing where we tested. They told us, to sanitize, cover, more social distancing, and so on. But if we're conducting quantitative research, on the other hand, this will be different. For example, you can conduct quantitative research on awareness, people awareness regarding the symptoms and how to prevent COVID-19. So they just complete a questionnaire. They say, yes, I'm aware. These are the symptoms. And we can prove those results and say people are aware or they are not aware at all. And then we can compare maybe rural areas versus urban areas, young versus old, and so on. That will be quantitative research. We're simply testing that they are aware or they are not aware. It's always two answers when you talk about testing hypothesis, the null and the alternative hypothesis, which means one is yes, the other one is no. In the table, there is another specific, very important aspect that differentiate between qualitative and quantitative research or approach is the sample. So when you talk about the sample, we're talking about the number of people that are going to be involved in the study or they're going to be interviewed. So basically our sample, we're talking about small. I want you to add with a pen or a pencil somewhere in your notes or in the textbook itself on that table. Remember the table we are following is the one on page 76. Most of the time we use the word it is small or the sample is large. However, what is large or how much is large and how much is small is always an interesting question that we ask here in research. So here you can write less than 100 somewhere. When you talk about a small sample, talking about less than 100 people most of the time. And then the large sample, I want you to write more than 100. So there is also some research as well as theory models that are used to explain your findings based on the sample. So here at the moment, I can 100, but I also want you to add next to more than that 100 and you add more than 400. So what it means is that a sample of 100 to 400, sometimes they still don't consider it large, but we know for a fact that a sample of more than 400 is a larger sample. What usually happens is that as soon as you mention less than 100 under small sample and you come to the large sample, you say more than 400, there is a missing middle. We're talking about 200, for example, and 300. People tend to be confused. Okay, those one, is it a small or is a larger sample? Research, it says, it talks about if I have to use this model, I must at least interview 300 people. If I have to use this model, I have to interview at least so many people. So most we know for a fact that the large sample is 400 people. So that missing middle, for now we will indicate it as a large sample, but just know that for an accurate answer with a large sample is more than 400, because if you say 200 people and I've done a large sample, some researchers can question that, for example, with the model and say this model cannot accommodate 200 people. The model, it needs at least 350 people, but it does not mean that 200 is also small. So just know that less than 100 is smaller for now, more than 400 is large sample. And there is another aspect that they talk about in the table here regarding the sample. Why is it small and why is it large? I want you to understand that part as well. It goes back to our purpose. If we are understanding and interpreting something that is new, that is unknown, only few people will know about that. So we're talking about exactly like we indicated the experts and the doctors. So you cannot use larger sample. And another thing, we don't want to generalize here. We just want to interpret. So we just want to explain the meaning of the new symptom and so on. So if we just want to explain something such as that one, we don't want to generalize. Whereas when we test a hypothesis, we want to generalize, which means the results that we get, we want to say in South Africa instead of saying in Pretoria. We want to generalize to the whole population, like those adverts say, thank you for voting as #1 brand, although some people did not vote. So the idea behind a larger sample and a smaller sample, it needs to be understood clearly. And then the second thing that I talk about as well here, it's selection of these respondents. You will see here it says not randomly selected. This side it says randomly selected. You must understand as well why do we do that. The way it's random, you'll understand that it means anyone. So you just select randomly. Whereas with non-random, which means that we become, it's called selective. So when we select these people, is purposive or selective selection. So purposive selection, we're talking about we select them based on purpose. For example, we just want to select people with specific skills. For example, they will understand the virus, maybe they've done medicine and so on. With here, you want to select randomly because you want to actually generalize. So what it means is that you cannot select people specifically and generalize results, because it simply means they did not have an equal chance to participate. We want people to have an equal chance to participate if we are testing a hypothesis. An equal chance to participate, it simply means someone could have selected Mr. Mahlangu, someone could have selected Thabo, for example. It was just going to happen. It was not a matter of whereby they said they wanted to select Thabo because Thabo is a soccer star or he plays football. So that will be purposive. So randomly selected, it talks about you just interview anyone. For example, we usually use a list here on randomly selecting. Because with the list, you can simply say, for example, you roll a number in that, you use a dice, you roll it, and then the dice says number 6. You select that person, is randomly. You roll the dice, it says number 3. You add 3 in the list to take number 9. So it's just something such as picking lotto numbers. But we don't do that with qualitative, like I've indicated that we want to select them on purpose. Representative, and then non-representative. So representative, it talks about the person that we are selecting, that he represent the whole, when we generalize, we want them to represent the whole population. What it means, it simply means that if we want to conduct a study in Soshanguve, we want to select a person who will represent Soshanguve because we're going to generalize those results. So we're going to say everyone in Soshanguve. In this case, we don't generalize, so they don't have to represent their location or represent a specific environment. So we can take doctors from Cuba and then we conduct a research with them regarding qualitative in South Africa, because the study does not represent the population. In this case, if we're going to test the hypothesis, those people should be South Africans because we want to generalize. So next to representative, we're just going to add as well the term that we're talking about, the representative and generalization. So what we've discussed here is the first part, research approach. And then this research approach, it's what we've talked about. It can either be qualitative or quantitative. What you want to do here, you want to write that discussion, followed by whether it's qualitative or quantitative, depending on the study that we are conducting. And then you come to motivation. So the last part that I want to talk about is motivation. So how do you motivate your answer? You use those two aspects that we've discussed. So these two aspects is purpose as well as sample. So you'll be reading a case study. The case study will tell you, for example, that the primary objective, we always look into the primary objective in terms of the purpose. If the purpose, for example, is to understand the living conditions of people living with disabilities, you can see the purpose is to understand. We don't test the hypothesis. We don't know how do they interpret the world and so on. So that will be, say, qualitative. You use that. So you will say the main purpose is to understand, not to test the hypothesis. It's important that when you articulate these sentences, you always indicate not the other one. Because it makes your sentence to be rich and more meaningful. So the purpose is to understand the living conditions of people living with disabilities, not to test whether they are happy or not to test whether they have money or not. So you interpret nicely there. But if, let's say, the study was different, in this case, the study wanted to find out or determine awareness level of COVID-19 symptoms among people, you can see we don't want to understand the awareness level. If we wanted to understand the awareness level, we will be interpreting it differently. We won't say people they understand it, they are aware or they are not aware. So in this case, quantitatively, if we wanted to determine awareness level, our hypothesis will be they are aware. It's a full stop. It's a conclusion that you are making. Or to say they are not aware, based on the results. So in awareness level, we'll put all those symptoms there. We'll put all those causes, and then they just rate. For example, did you know that you can get COVID from touching substances such as an elevator? And then they say no, yes. Did you know that you can prevent COVID-19 by washing your hands regularly and so on? And then if they say no, yes, we're going to use those answers, and they'll tell us that, okay, people are aware or not aware. You can see we are testing a hypothesis. We come up, when we start with our study, we already have some sort of a conclusion, a guess that I think they are aware, they are not aware, but with their understanding and interpreting the different scenario, we have no clue of where we are getting. It's like, for example, trying to understand, obviously it's going to be difficult to give practical examples here because it must be new. Just understand that it must be something that is unknown. So if I use an example of something that it's unknown, the term that I'm going to use, it's a term that you've never heard as well. So it won't actually makes more sense to give you practical examples there. But like I've indicated, we want to understand the living conditions of people with disabilities, or we want to understand how do students who come from disadvantaged background cope at universities. You can see our aim is to actually understand. So we won't ask questions. We won't even have some sort of a guess that they pass or they fail. We have no clue. We have to understand the whole environment of those people. A second thing that you use to motivate your answer is the sample itself. So if the case study said 60 people should be interviewed or 15 people should be put in a focus group, you use that as well. This study is qualitative because it wants to understand, and then you come to the sample. The sample is also smaller because we're only going to interview 16 people, 15 people, 60 people, as long as it's less than 100 people. We usually tell you how many people you should interview in the case studies, so that you use as well. So if it's 500 people, you already know I'm actually conducting a quantitative study, and you use that as well to motivate your answer. So we are done with the 3.1. Discussion, correct approach, and motivation. There are 3 things that I need you to do now. So let's quickly open here so that you can understand the learning activity that we are doing now. So I will call it learning activity. There are 3 case studies that we have shared so far. So I'm going to start with Pluto. That's number 1. You'll remember. And then Pluto Fitness Club, it's about the gym. So you'll have to have that case study somewhere next to you. And then we also did advertising alcohol. Alcohol advertising. I think it was towards usage or something, or towards consumption, yes. Towards consumption, that's the second case study. So there is a third case study that we need to work on, and that is healthy behavior. So let me tell you where do you get this case study, because it's a case study that we have to use today. So remember, you have to go to Brightspace once again, and then you come under practical guide to download the research proposal. You will see this is where I clicked to download the research proposal, and it's open right here. So this is our research proposal. We need to put the answer for a research approach regarding that. So the case study of healthy behavior, it's in that document. It's written exercise, healthy behavior. So we're not going to work on healthy behavior for now because it's going to require some time for you to read and understand it. We're just going to work on the ones that we know. So we're going to work on the 2 here, which is Pluto Fitness Club, as well as alcohol advertising. So I need you to indicate, you write that in the comment section there. Write the research approach for this one. So our research approach is either qualitative or quantitative. Write the research approach in comment. So you're gonna type that one. So long, it's gonna take about 5 minutes. You also do this one. Come to writing a research approach in the comment box there. So I'm gonna take a 2 minutes break, 2 to 3 minutes break. Remember, you must also write the motivation. Research approach as motivation. Why you say it's quantitative, use the answers that are in the case study. So we did indicate that you use the purpose and the sample size there, but it must not be written in theory. Remember, when you motivate, it's still practical answer. So the answer that you write must only be applied to that case study. So if I take that answer and use it on another case study, it should not work. So make sure that you use weights from the case study or that shows a practical application there. So we're gonna continue with the class at around 10 to about 3 minutes break. So please do that. Okay, you left with 1 minute now. I'm not seeing much of the answers in the chat box, so please participating by writing that answer. Left with 1 minute so that you can continue with class. Okay, I'm going to continue with class now. So I'm going to go back to the case studies. So in terms of Pluto Fitness Club, you will remember that they wanted to actually find out whether consumers or gym members are satisfied or not. So that is quantitative approach. I'll tell you why. In this case, remember you must define it first. So first of all, they want to test the hypothesis. And their hypothesis is satisfied gym members, not satisfied gym members. So that's their hypothesis that they have because they wanted to test whether they are happy or not happy. So in a way, they already have an answer or a guess or assumption that they are happy or not. Those are the two outcomes. I could understand why the comment, I've read the comment where you indicated that is qualitative because they don't know basically why their gym membership have declined. That makes a complete sense. It would be qualitative if we took an approach whereby we did not have the objective. So when you read the case study, it says they want to do a marketing research to find out whether gym members are satisfied or not satisfied. If they did not write that part down, it simply means they were going to conduct a qualitative, like you've indicated, meaning that it's not just about satisfaction or not satisfaction. Maybe they could look into other aspects as well, why they are not happy, why they did not renew, and then they will conduct focus group. But because they indicated this, so in this case, the case study was so specific to us that our primary objective, it revolves around satisfaction level. So that's why we're taking a quantitative approach. So make sure that when you are approached by research companies, you also look in terms of that. Do they give you some sort of an assumption that they want information on? So in this case, they give us an assumption that they want to find out about satisfaction or not satisfaction. If they don't give you an assumption, you can make assumption for now for them if you want to do a quantitative approach. But if you also have no clue what could be the cause or you want to understand, then you follow a quantitative approach. The second thing that you use is the sample size. In this case, the case study did not provide. They didn't tell us how many people should be interviewed here. So we cannot use that motivation, but we can suggest it as well. Because the case study did not provide it, we can indicate, for example, a larger sample size. A large sample size is required. Is required because we already said we are using the quantitative approach, and then we motivate our answer there. At least 400. Remember, large sample size is 400. At least 400 gym members should be surveyed or interviewed. And then we come to the second one, alcohol advertising. You'll remember the primary objective for here. They wanted to find out the influence of alcohol advertising towards consumption. So can we make a suggestion on this one? Can we make a hypothesis? Can we have a guess statement regarding that? So in other words, our guess statement could be something, yes, it does influence. So yes, alcohol advertising influence consumption. The more we advertise, the more people drink alcohol. And then we can say no. That's another assumption, which is an alternative. No, alcohol advertising does not influence people to consume more alcohol. So it's also a quantitative approach. Because another thing that you have to look into to say is not qualitative is to look into the fact that, do we know what is advertising? Do we know what is alcohol? Do we know what is consumption? So yes, we know all those terms. There is no need for us to define and understand those terms or interpret those terms. If these were jargon words, some words that we never heard of before, then we will conduct a qualitative approach because we're still trying to identify or understand what is advertising. So we know all this. We are testing a hypothesis again. And then our hypothesis, remember primary objective is that alcohol, advertising, influence alcohol consumption, or it does not. So that is our two hypotheses that we have. I think in this case we had a sample size, so we can also use that. So if you read the case study, it said 5,000 people should be interviewed as well from the list of 25,000. So please just read the case study more to understand the sample size and where did I get that 5,000 respondents. But I think it's in the last paragraph. You will see I use the word surveyed to refer to interview a lot. It's because as soon as you use the word interview, people, they don't think about interview as a survey. They will think about one-on-one, like going for a work interview and so on. So we prefer the word survey to indicate that it does not necessarily mean we're going to have a one-on-one session. A survey, remember, you can complete a survey online. It could be a questionnaire. So use the word survey more often when you're talking about quantitative. But if it's qualitative, use the word interview. It's the same thing where we refer to respondents here. So you'll see I use the word respondents, but if it was qualitative, you'll tend to use the word participants because those people, they sit in the focus group, they participate rather than just become a respondents. So let's move on to the second part. And this is a research design. So once again, research design, you do it the same way as research approach. You first indicate the research, the definition or the discussion of what is the meaning. What is the meaning of the word research design? And then you choose the correct one. We've got 3 designs that you can choose from, and then you motivate your answer. So let's start with the discussion first. Once again, if you use this document with the guidelines, you already have your discussion there. It says a research design is simply an outline, framework, or a plan for a research project. So what it means, this is a structure that you're going to follow. So an outline, remember, is a structure like, let me quickly show you one structure. This is a structure as well, meaning that we're gonna follow this structure. From here, we're gonna do data collection method, instrument, everything that is written like this is a structure. So it's an outline. So this outline differs. We've got 3 different outlines that we're going to talk about. So it's indicate the sentence based on the research objective, whether we are exploring or we are testing an hypothesis. That is our objective. We can use exploratory research. We can use descriptive. We can use causal. So I want us to follow with the textbook as well. In the textbook, I'm on page 70. So you open on page 70, you look where it says research objective classification. You will see figure 5.1 there. It should be similar to the one that I'm quickly going to show you on the slide. It should be similar to that one. So in the textbook, I need you to add with a pen or a pencil or highlight where it says exploratory research. You write qualitative approach next to it there because we use that design if we are doing a qualitative approach. So as soon as you choose your approach to be quantitative, you will not use this one, you will use this one. So conclusive research, you should never use that term there, use descriptive or causal. So there's 2 research designs that you can use under quantitative. So conclusive, it simply means that we are making a conclusion like we're doing with the hypothesis as well. Because we are testing a hypothesis, we're saying alcohol advertising influence consumption. That is a conclusion statement, don't you think, whereby you are making a statement to say, yes, people are influenced by advertising to drink more. Or you are making a conclusion statement to say, no, people will drink regardless whether they see an advert or not. It does not influence their consumption. But we need to talk the difference between these 2, descriptive and causal. So we're going to start by unpacking each. Let's start by unpacking exploratory. So like I've indicated, this side you write qualitative approach, where it says conclusive, you write quantitative approach. Under exploratory research, there is quite a few things that you need to highlight in the textbook. On page 70, where it says exploratory research design, I need you to highlight the last sentence there just before those bullets. It says, the objectives of exploratory research are as follows. And then number 1, you can also write NB there. Very important to understand those objectives. The first one, they talk about to acquire new insight into a phenomenon that is being researched. That it simply means to understand it more. That's where you acquire new insights. The second one, it says to be a preliminary survey before a more structured study can be conducted. So what it simply means, it simply means that before you conduct a survey, before you interview 400 people, you can interview 15 people just to see if your questionnaire does not have mistakes, people understand the questionnaire and so on. And it will still be an exploratory research because you only interviewed a small sample size and you did not have hypothesis. So you did not have something such as, yes, the questionnaire will work. You wanted to understand what will work and what will not work. What questions will they understand and so on. To explain central concepts and construct, you'll see that on page 70 as well. So that talks about defining the terms. Like I've indicated, things such as alcohol, advertising, those terms, they no longer need to be explained. You understand them. But when it comes to a new research, for example, things such as regarding COVID-19 and so on, vaccination, when people still need to understand that. So it could be described if you are using exploratory research for that, because you're not testing a hypothesis, you want to understand it. To determine priorities, and the last one, to develop new hypotheses, because you don't have hypothesis by then. So those 5 objectives should be highlighted. And now we can come to descriptive studies on page 71. This is part of qualitative.
Sir,
Yes, please ask.
what did you say we must write on conclusive research?
You write quantitative.
Quantitative.
Yes, and then where it says exploratory, you write qualitative.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So if you continue in the textbook, we continue under conclusive now, where it's quantitative. Thank you for that question. Descriptive is the first one. That is a research design that you can use. There is quite few words that I need you to highlight. It's line number 4. It says, descriptive research can describe opportunities or threats, you highlight that, and answer questions such as who, what, when, and where. You highlight that sentence. And then you also highlight the second line. It says, this is necessary when knowledge of a particular market, especially that part where it talks about a particular market, it's unclear. So we use descriptive research to actually understand a particular market. What that means, it simply means when we conduct descriptive research, we usually have our consumers and we want to understand their attitude, their satisfaction level. Anything that deals with consumers here, we use descriptive research because that is the market. That's why I want you to highlight that part. So you also write there with a pen or a pencil where it says particular market under descriptive, or if you're writing in the notes under descriptive research, you just write them about consumers / market, and then you write the following aspects: attitudes, influence, satisfaction level. So anything that deals with our consumers in marketing will conduct it descriptive. There's one last thing that I have to indicate regarding descriptive is that the method of data collection. So on page 73, I also want you to highlight that part on page 73. You have a table there, table 5.1. You highlight where it says, because they compare it nicely on that table between the three design, you highlight where it says descriptive, it's in line number 1, to describe market characteristics of functions. They write it more nicely there because we are talking about our consumers there. That's the market. The last part that I wanted to highlight is on the last row in that table where it says methods. So it's on page 74. So under descriptive, you will see it talks about data collection methods there. You highlight those methods. So the first one, it says secondary data, but the one that I wanted to highlight is surveys. And like I've indicated, surveys, it's when we communicate. So you write survey, where it says surveys, you can write brackets there, communicate with the respondents. Anything that talks about survey, we're talking about communication is key, which means it could be verbal communication where we call them, we ask them questions, or not verbal communication. For example, we simply send a research questionnaire online and then they complete that questionnaire online. We don't communicate them verbally there, but there's still communication that takes place. So how does this one differs from causal research? Most of the time when I start to look into assessment or when I mark the script, most students will write casual research. So just understand that it's causal, not casual research, because it's always the case where it comes from the word cause, because it's about cause and effect, like they talk about it on page 73. Causal research, it's a cause and effect relationship. So how does this one work? We don't interview. So we go back to page 74. You'll see data collection there. It's lab and field experiment. So I want you to write in brackets observation. No communication, it's just observation here. So it will help us to choose the best research design. So what it means, we manipulate one variable. That's what they are telling us here on page 73 in the second line, so that you can see what effect it has on another variable. So let's use a practical example so that you can understand here. So if you follow with me on the slide, starting with exploratory research, this could be something such as COVID, like I've indicated. Maybe in 2019, there were experts sitting around the table trying to understand the disease. They shared their ideas and so on. We had no hypothesis by then. If we are conducting a descriptive studies, it could be something such as consumer awareness, or what is their attitude towards wearing a mask. Some people can have a bad attitude, maybe they don't want that, or positive attitude whereby they wear mask all the time. Some wouldn't wear it all the time, but we must interview these people to understand their attitudes. Maybe they will tell us that they have negative attitudes or positive attitude. If it's causal research, that one will be experiment in nature. It's about cause and effect. So for example, we won't interview the respondents. We tend to use it a lot in marketing with new brand or new branding or new packaging. So if you want to see whether people will adopt a new packaging, we don't advertise that. We don't ask anything them. We'll take one brand, which is new, put it at one of the stores, maybe at Pick and Pay. And then we take another brand, which is old, with the same colors. We put it at another Pick and Pay store. So we use two different stores. And then we look at the effect that they have. We can observe customers, whether they pick up a new brand, but there was no communication necessary with them. So it's a cause and effect. Another thing that I can use that could relate to, maybe it's something such as classes. So in terms of classes, when we conduct classes, instead of asking new questions as students, maybe what is the effect of online learning towards your marks, I will just rather do online learning and then compare it with your mark results. So I did not communicate with you. I took one group, I did online learning, another group, it was contact learning. Then I compared the marks. So it's causal research because I'm looking at the cause, which is online learning, towards the effect, and the effect becomes maybe the mark or the success rate or the pass rate, something such as that one. So that's how these three differs. The first one, exploratory, is the one that we use, like I've indicated, under qualitative. And then descriptive, we describe market characteristics. Those are consumers. And the last one is causal, cause and effect, which is just observation. So we need to go back to the case study that we have. and start with Pluto Fitness Club. And then in terms of Pluto Fitness Club, say here we are choosing a research design. So we already know that we cannot choose exploratory because we already chose quantitative. So your answers should be aligned here. So if it was qualitative, we will just say exploratory. But since it's quantitative, it's either descriptive or causal research. So in the next 2 minutes, I want you to write in the comment box which one do you think it is for Pluto Fitness Club, which one do you think it is for alcohol advertising consumption, between causal research and descriptive research. So we'll continue with class after you write the comments at 2:15. Okay, I'm gonna continue. Under Pluto Fitness Club, you will see that it's descriptive, it's not causal. If it was causal design, we will have one variable where we manipulate it and we won't have to communicate with consumers. You'll remember here we want to interview these gym members. So what are we trying to do here? We want to actually understand market characteristics. So I'm gonna write gym members characteristics instead of market because we know we're dealing with gym members. So the characteristics here, you must write them down to show practicality. The characteristics that we're trying to understand for gym members, the first one is satisfaction level, which means we're gonna ask them whether they are satisfied or not. We also talked about, if you read the case study in the last paragraph, they said they wanted to find out the perceptions, your secondary research objectives. So these are the characteristics that you write here. Remember, we talked about the perceptions that they have towards luxury gyms. Satisfaction level was the primary objective. There was body mass index as well to understand them. So remember the body mass index, for example, their fitness levels and so on. We're all gonna ask these questions. So these are the market characteristics that we want to understand. If you come to alcohol advertising, similar. It's also descriptive research. So the design that we are adopting for it to be descriptive here, we also want to describe here. Okay, please change your notes as well. Use the word describe instead of the word understand. The reason behind that is that we are following a quantitative approach. So as soon as you use the word understand, it tends to look as if you are following a qualitative approach. So we want to describe market characteristics here. So your practicality, once again, are those specific aspects. For example, the characteristics that we want to understand is the consumption. How much alcohol do they consume? We're gonna ask them that. Consumption of alcohol. We talked about brand preference as well, whether they prefer cider or whiskey or wine and so on. So brand preference is another characteristics which we're gonna ask them. And then I think there was also things such as consumer demographics, for example. So you look in terms of your objectives for you to find those characteristics. That's if it's descriptive. If this was causal, we're not going to ask them this consumption. We're simply just going to maybe use something such as we look in terms of the consumption of alcohol at bottle store. Can use the sales figures, or you can use the bar receipts, or they tend to use trace analysis in most of the studies. So with trace analysis, instead of looking at people, how much they buy, we look at the empty bottles, maybe after a week or after a day. Then we can also get an idea there to say, you know what, these are the favorite brand, because most people bought Savannah if there's more empty bottles of Savannah and so on. That will be an observation. That will be a causal research. So because we don't want to describe market characters by interviewing them, we want to observe. So in your motivation here, you also need to talk more about how you're going to collect data, observation versus survey. So that also helps you to understand or to explain that is descriptive. So let's continue. So you choose that between those three research designs, you apply it practically in the case study, depending on the case study you are dealing with. There are three research studies now I want us to do a practical activity on. So I've given you the three different situations whereby we are conducting marketing research. For example, the first research is how do elderly people living in a retirement home perceive their situation and how are they dealing with it? I need you just to write in the comment box. Number 1 is either exploratory, descriptive, or causal. You write number 2, whether it's exploratory, descriptive, or causal, as well as number 3, whether it's descriptive. So number 2, do mature students perform better academically than younger students? So in this case, they are asking about people like 25 years and so on, or those one who are younger, which one perform better? How do consumers rate the level of service in the insurance company? So please indicate the type of research design in the comment box, number 1, number 2, number 3. You just write exploratory, descriptive, or causal. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes for that exercise, and then we're going to continue with the class.
Yes. So we can anymore.
Mieni, I can hear you very well. Are you having a question?
Say those questions, we need to see them on the screen so that we can answer.
Oh, I'm very sorry. Yeah.
I don't think we see
All right, ladies and gentlemen, gonna continue with the study. So now, okay, I see your comment here. First one, you said exploratory, 100% for that one. Remember, you cannot use the word conclusive. We don't have a conclusive research design. So after exploratory, you're left with descriptive and causal. So I'm quickly gonna go back to that. So causal, I see that one. Let me quickly go back to that slide. The first research, it says, how do elderly people living in a retirement home perceive their situation and how are they dealing with it? First question we need to ask ourselves here is that, can we make hypotheses regarding this, or we can't make an hypothesis? If we can make a hypothesis, which means we can answer this question in two ways, yes or no, or something like that, then it was going to be descriptive or causal. But in this case, we can't make a hypothesis. We don't know how do they live, how do old people perceive their situation. They have to explain this to us, and then we write it down. And how are they dealing with? Remember, we cannot develop hypotheses in terms of how does a person deal with something. They have to tell you as well. It will differ from one person to another as well. So it is exploratory. And I did see most of your answers are related to that. So kudos for that. Second one, do mature students perform better academically than younger students? So can we develop a hypothesis for this one? Yes, we can develop a hypothesis. For example, our hypothesis is yes, they perform better, or no, they don't perform better. So what it's asking is that those students who matured age, for example, they are 25 years to 30 years, we compare them with students who are 15 to 20 in the same class. Which one are performing better? So we already know that it's a conclusion statement, yes or no. So it's either descriptive or causal. So the question that we ask ourselves here for us to find out whether it's descriptive or causal is, are we gonna ask these students a question? Are we gonna communicate with them, or are we simply gonna use observations? Which one do you think work best? I think observation will work best, because we'll simply compare their age and compare with their marks. We don't ask them anything. And another thing is that if we ask them, they can lie. Because I'm more than 25, I would like to say I perform better. Because I'm young, I would like to say I'm perform better. So their answers could be fabricated in a way. So causal for number 2. Number 3, how do consumers rate the level of service in the insurance company? Can we make a hypothesis here? Yes, we can say they rated 10 out of 10. We can say they rated 1 out of 10. So you can see we can have a conclusion statement, a hypothesis regarding this. So we already know it's either descriptive or causal. And we have to ask ourselves, are we going to ask these people, are we going to have communication with them, or are we simply going to do observations? So it's impossible for someone to rate the level with observation. You cannot, if some people can look happy but they are not happy, or they can look sad while they are happy, so we cannot observe them. We have to ask them. They have to tell us here to get the correct answer. So we give them a questionnaire, they rate the claim process, they rate out of 10 things such as prices and so on. So for this one it will be descriptive. So exploratory, causal, descriptive. And then we've got more of other practical examples in the slide. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I think you do get the idea in terms of how do we choose between this research design. The last thing that we have to talk about before I conclude the class is the time and financial cost. This is also included in the research proposal, so you should know how to develop time and financial cost. But it's very easy if you know what to do. So I'm going to show you exactly what to do, which is going to make your job easier for the next assessment. So your time and financial cost, they will always stay the same. So don't try and change these activities. They have 6 activities. Once again, where do you get this part? You take it from that research proposal guidelines. This one, you just go down, you come to time and financial cost. Those are your research activities. You have them there. So they will always stay the same. You get marks for that. But the 2 things that will differ now is the schedule as well as cost. So where it says total here, there are 2 things that I want you to write down. The first thing that you have to write down is the number of months. If the schedule is for 2 months, you write 2 months, and you also write the period. So let me illustrate the difference. Total could be, for example, it will take us 6 months, depending on the case study. So if the case study say they want the results by end of June, and we know already now it's the beginning of June, so we only have 1 month. But remember, you cannot conduct research in 1 month, so it's always 3 months or more. And then the second one is the total duration. So here, the duration will say from June to December, if that is 7 months, 2021. So you'll see the differences between the total in terms of 6 months and the duration itself in terms of how which period are we taking here. And then the cost, it will be in rands. Obviously, you're going to add your cost here. There's 2 things that you need to take into account. How do you come up with the schedule here? Your schedule or your total duration here, it will be the day you do the assessment or you do the research proposal. So for example, today, if we're doing a research proposal, our schedule will start here by saying June 1, and then defining the problem. When are we going to collect secondary data? When are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? And then we put there if it's 1 month, 2 weeks, 3 months, and so on. In terms of cost, the case study can tell you how much. You remember with Pluto Fitness Club, they say they have 250,000. So you always use the budgeted amount. So the budget that they give you, you use that. If it's 1 million, show how you're going to spend that 1 million. If it's 10,000, show how you're going to spend that 10,000. So once again, the schedule, you do the 2 things. So if you say 1 month, you also have to indicate from 1 June to 30 June. If it's 2 months, you indicate as well as here 1 July till 30 August and so on. So there are activities that takes longer than other activities. That's where you must show your practicality. Collecting primary data. So use the schedule that is already developed. It will show you exactly which schedule takes a longer time, which takes a shorter time. That will help you as well to know. Collecting primary data, it takes longer because we interview people, we travel and so on. You will see with research report, you can take, or data analysis, you can take shorter time. And then you distribute your cost similar to your schedule. So those ones which takes longer, like collecting primary data, the cost will also be larger. For example, because there is paying of remuneration of interviewers and so on, that's why it becomes larger. That brings us to the end of our class lesson today. So before you leave, in the chat box, if you are happy, please use a smiley face there, and sad face, anything, any comment, and we are done with class. So please keep in contact with Brightspace to see your test, date and schedule, and all the best. So we're done with classes for now. So enjoy the day. Goodbye.
Hey, Brazil. Are you happy, Ju?
Madam said, I don't know.
No, man. Ngifuna
Na emotion funani.
say, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.